Hello, greetings everyone. We continue our series on the Vijñāna-bhairava-tantra with verses 22 to 24. And in this video, we finally begin to examine the practices of the text. As you probably know, the bulk of the text is devoted to practice. Verses 24 through 132 or 134, something like that, are all practice verses. And a few practices get more than one verse, but many practices are encapsulated in a single verse. So we're going to get to the first of those practices today. Now, you recall that what just happened is a little discussion on the relationship of Shiva and Shakti, of awareness and energy, which are said to be as inseparable as fire and its power to burn. And that was preceded by an explanation of what the fundamental nature of being is, which was defined as that overflowing state of fullness that we call the goddess. So this overflowing state of fullness, the state of repleteness, this state in which you feel you need nothing outside of yourself except what naturally presents itself in the flow of experience, moment to moment. And this is the goal of the text, to abide in this state of fullness, this bharitā in Sanskrit. And so next, Bhairavi has a couple more questions for Bhairava. And this is a wonderful part of the text because here she pushes him to get very, very practical. Having expounded some philosophy for a dozen verses, now she wants him to get practical. And this certainly mirrors my experience. I don't know if this reinforces any gender stereotypes, but I've taught in yoga teacher trainings all over the world and workshops as well. And in my experience, it's usually women who say, wait a second, can you make this more practical? What are we actually doing here? How do we actually negotiate these practices? How do they lead to the goal that we seek? And I remember Joseph Campbell said something very similar in an interview. He said, he taught at Sarah Lawrence, an all-women's college, and he believed anyway that if he hadn't, he wouldn't have gotten as practical as he did in his work, where he sought to show how the myths of the cultures of the world are actually relevant to our everyday lives. So anyway, just a little note on that, more of a editorial, I suppose, or an opinion. But Bhairavi asks the following questions of Bhairava, and put it in the chat window first. Verses 22 and 23. I won't do the Sanskrit for these, but I will for the next one. So goddess Bhairavi says to her husband, her lover, her interlocutor, her sometime teacher, sometime student, Bhairava, she says, O God of gods, whose symbol is the trident, and whose ornaments are made from human skulls, this state of fullness of the divine, free of time, space, or locality, and impossible to represent conceptually, by what means is it attained? And how does the supreme goddess, Parā become the gateway into that? Answer me this in such a way that I can completely understand it, O Bhairava. So I want to point out a couple of things here. First, she demonstrates that she has really heard what he said by reflecting some of it back to him. That's the bit in between the em dashes. She says, this state of fullness of the divine, free of time, space, or locality, and impossible to represent conceptually. She mirrors back some of the phrases that he used, showing that she's heard and understood. And now she has this question, by what means is it attained? Upalabhyate, by what means is it realized or attained? The word means both in Sanskrit. And furthermore, how is it that the Supreme Goddess becomes the gateway into that divine state of fullness? And then she makes a request, very beautiful request. Answer me this in such a way that I can completely understand it, O Bhairava. And the word translated as completely, samyak, means also properly. Answer me this in such a way that I can understand it completely and correctly, O Bhairava. So she puts the onus on the teacher, as it should be, to explain it in such a way that the understanding that results is accurate and complete. And indeed, the primary onus is on the teacher for that. And there are just, tragically, there have been so many people and so many yoga philosophy workshops all over the world who thought they didn't get what was being taught because they weren't smart enough or didn't have enough background, when actually it's just that the teacher wasn't completely clear. So there's a lot of ambiguity, woolly thinking, and lack of clarity in the teaching of yoga philosophy oftentimes. And that is it's up to the teacher to articulate things in a way that are crystal clear. And I like to quote my first guru, who used to love to say, check, double check, be clear, be crystal clear, be super crystal clear. That was like a little sutra that she gave me and us. So I've tried to follow that. So hopefully I can make things super crystal clear for you guys. That's certainly my goal in all my teaching and writing, and I don't always succeed, but it's nice to have that goal. Okay, so maybe I will actually do the Sanskrit of these last couple of verses, or last verse and a half. She sings, Yavasta bharitā kara bhairavasyopa Kairupair mukam tasya parā devi katam bhavet. Yata samyagaham vedmi tata me bruhi bhairava. So in fact, verse 23 breaks the rules, the conventions for Sanskrit verses of this meter in having 3 lines instead of 2. So when she, I don't know if there's any significance to this, but when she asks these questions of Bhairava, she breaks out of the box a little bit, and we get a verse that goes outside of the normal form for Anushtubh verses. And maybe that's intentional on the part of the author. So, answer me this in such a way that I can completely and accurately understand it, O Bhairava. And Bhairava simply launches into the practices. It's a beautiful moment because she's asked him to get practical, and instead of saying, oh yes, I will get practical, and first let's get a little bit more clear on the philosophy. No, he just launches straight into the practices in passionate response in answer to her plea, her query. And so he begins with verse 24. And verse 24 is the first practice of this scripture, the most famous practice of this scripture, and it's also a response to her second question. Remember, she said, how does the Supreme Goddess, Parā become the gateway into that state of divinity, that overflowing state of fullness and completeness that we're going for? So the practice is also an answer to that question, and this is something that most translations don't, or most translators of this text so far don't notice or don't show that they've noticed in their translations. So let's look at that verse then. The moment has arrived. So there you have the Sanskrit to follow along with. Ūrdhve prāṇo adho jīvo visargātmā paroccaret utpatti-dvitaya-sthāne bharaṇād bharitā sthitiḥ. And I'll just give you the translation and then we'll talk about it. The Supreme Goddess constantly articulates or expresses herself as the life-giving flow of breath, prāṇa rising up and jīva descending. By pausing at the two places where they arise and filling those points with silent awareness, one abides in the state of inner fullness. So I'll just read it one more time and then we'll analyze it word by word. The Supreme Goddess constantly articulates as the life-giving flow of breath, prāṇa rising up and jīva descending. By pausing at the two places where they arise and filling those points with silent awareness, one abides in the state of inner fullness. So he's answering two questions actually in this verse, because remember she asked, how do we access that state of inner fullness, that bharitā avastha? And he's answering that, but he's also answering, how does the Supreme Goddess serve as the entryway to that? It says, because parā, the Supreme or Supreme Goddess, you can translate it both ways because it's a feminine, the Supreme Goddess constantly articulates herself as the life-giving flow of breath. Now, there's a lot of nuance to every word in this particular verse. So the word for articulates is uccaret, and uccaret is a derivation of the word uccara. So what that means is that he is implying a specific practice where we visualize or feel or imagine that the breath is not going out the nose like normal, but it is in fact rising up and down the central channel. So this is an absolutely key thing that many translations and interpretations don't get right, that in this practice, you are imagining that the flow of breath, or rather the flow of prana underlying the breath, is moving in the central channel. So the exhale rises up and out of the crown of the head to a point above the head, about there. And the inhale comes back down through the crown of the head into the central channel and into the base of the heart. So how do we know this for sure? Well, it's actually super clear in the Sanskrit, because we see the phrase visargātmā. Okay, so look in the end of the first line, the first verse half. Visargātmā paroccaret. Okay, so paroccaret is a sandhi form for parā, uccaret. Okay, so the Supreme Goddess articulates uccaret as the visarga, right? As I was translating as the life-giving flow of breath. But visarga also means emission, and it also means it means the sound. But in the Sanskrit language, or in the scripts used to represent the Sanskrit language, this sound of is represented by two dots. And this is in almost every script used to write Sanskrit, not just Devanagari, which you've seen before, but also Sharada and other scripts as well. The visarga is represented as 2 dots. Now, why does this matter? It's incredibly clever on the part of the author to invoke this word visarga, which simultaneously means emission and life-giving flow, right? Because visarga also actually means, in a different context, in a sexual context, visarga means ejaculation. So emission, ejaculation, life-giving flow, and the sound are all meanings of visarga. But, and this is something only a Sanskritist could know, really, that visarga, or anyone who's studied Sanskrit, I suppose, that visarga is these 2 dots in the written form. Now, what are those 2 dots? How do they relate to this practice? They relate to the 2 points of the breath, okay? So it says right there, beginning of the second line, utpatti-dvitaya-sthāne, in the 2 places where the breath arises and subsides. Now, visarga is always 2 dots stacked on top of each other. So this is how we know that the interpretation of doing this meditation as the breath going out of the nose and coming back like that is incorrect, because the 2 points where the breath subsides and arises from must be stacked on top of one another in the manner of a visarga, as the verse specifies and or implies, depending on how you want to see it. So the upper point, the upper kind of upper point of the visarga, the upper bindu, is up here above the crown of the head. It's called the dwadashanta point. And how do we know that? Because the text is very concerned with this dwadashanta point. In many other verses, this point is mentioned and utilized in practice. And the second point is at the base of the heart. That's not specified in this verse, but we know it to be the case from other verses in the text, which also utilize the base of the heart and juxtapose the base of the heart region, right about here, with that dwada. Okay, so let's now look at the first few words of the verse, which I skipped over in this word-by-word analysis. Ūrdhve prāṇa, ūrdhve prāṇo, right? So the prana goes up. Now, this is a point of great confusion in the world of modern yoga, in both India and in the West, that prana in all our primary sources, and certainly all the classical primary sources, prana is the exhale and apana is the inhale. So this is a point of confusion because in modern yoga, people teach that prana is the inhale and apana is the exhale. But this is certainly incorrect vis-a-vis all our primary sources in Sanskrit, barring 1 or 2 that I've seen. So we have dozens, even hundreds of sources in which it's the case that prana is exhale and apana is inhale. So how does this make sense? Just very briefly, to inhale, the diaphragm moves down. And if this is just very obvious, sorry to be condescending if it is, your nose is above your lungs. So obviously the air is literally going down. The air is moving in and down. And so the diaphragm moves down to pull the air in and down. Diaphragm moving down creates partial vacuum in the lungs, pulls the air in and down. So apana, inhale is apana is inhale, down is inhale. This is literally true, somatically, physiologically, but also it's philosophically true in the tradition. Why? Because inhale is the first breath you took as a baby. And inhale is the choice to be alive. Inhale is the movement into embodiment, as I added into the verse. This is super important in the tradition, that inhale cannot be up, because inhale is coming down to earth, choosing this life, choosing this embodiment. It's crystal clear in the tradition. This is not a point of debate. And I know it seems surprising that the whole of modern yoga would have gotten it wrong vis-a-vis these primary sources. But nonetheless, it is the case. Why do people think of inhale as up? Mainly just because the chest rises up with the inhale, with a deep inhale, the chest rises up. So you feel a rising up in the body. Now, how do we understand this? The inhale is literally down physiologically, and the air is moving in and down, but there's also a rising up in exactly the same way that if you have a pitcher of water, or if you're pouring water into a pitcher, I should say, you're pouring the water down, aren't you? But the water level rises up. So it's exactly the same with the breath. Inhale is down, but if you inhale deep enough, the chest rises up, just like that water level. That's the way to understand it most simply, I think. Now, exhale, prana is up, ūrdhve prāṇo. It's very clear there, right? Exhale is up. Why? Because exhale is surrender to the universe. And exhale, it will be the last breath that you have in this life, will be an exhale. So exhale is offering your life force to the universe. If you don't inhale again, that's the end of this body, right? So exhale is opening up to the absolute, right? So in the tattva schema, Shiva Shakti are always at the top, earth is always at the bottom. So inhale is down to earth, and exhale is offering up to the absolute Shiva Shakti, right? Paramashiva, whatever you want to call it. That's super important in the tradition. Okay, so in the verse you see the word jīvo for jīva, and that is commonly used as an equivalent to apana. And that's why I add the phrase in the translation, the movement into embodiment. So jīva specifically means an embodied soul, but it also means inhale. In tantric sources only, not in other sources, does it also mean inhale. Okay, so now we've explained all the words in the first half of the verse except the word he. This little particle he means for it is the case. So this signals that he's responding to Bhairavi's questions. He's saying, for, meaning we don't often, in modern colloquial English, we don't often begin sentences with the word for, meaning because, but it's common in Sanskrit. So because, we could just translate because. I don't put that in the translation because I don't want to confuse things, but it says, because it is the case that the Supreme Goddess articulates as the life-giving flow of breath. She has the form of the visarga, right? Which movement consists of the upward flow of prana and the downward flow of jīva. So you see the word adho, that's the same word as in adho mukha svanasana, downward facing dog. Adho, downward. And then it says utpatti-dvitaya-sthāne. In these two places where the breath arises, the exhale arises from the base of the heart, and the inhale arises from the point above the head. What should we do with these 2 points? These 2 points where the breath arises. He says, bharaṇād, we are to fill them. And so this is a bit cryptic. Fill them with what? Well, fill them with, I said in the translation, silent awareness. And indeed, this is an inference. It's not explicit in the verse, but it makes sense because the practice is one where we pause for a moment at the end of the inhale in the base of the heart and before the exhale begins. And then we pause again at the end of the exhale and before the inhale begins. And in that pause, you can feel this profound stillness. If the practice clicks for you, you'll feel this profound stillness, silent presence, still silent presence. And you are to repose in that fullness, bharaṇa, in the verse. Now, again, a clever play on words. Bharaṇa is cognate with the word bhairava or bhairavi, both. Cognate meaning etymologically related. So by filling or nourishing those 2 points with, I infer, still silent awareness, then one experiences the state of bharitā, overflowing fullness. So that is the same word as we had previously in the description of the ultimate goal of the practice and the nature of your fundamental being. Okay, so are all those words crystal clear? We can have a moment for questions, and then we'll simply do the practice. Okay. So just before I take questions, let's note which words in the verse have double or triple meanings. Okay, jīva, double meaning, embodied soul, and also inhale. Visarga, double or triple meaning, right? This life-giving flow of breath, this sound, and the two dots in the Sanskrit systems of writing. Okay, so there's a double or triple meaning of visarga. And then the other words are rich with meaning, but they don't actually have double meanings. Okay, so let's see what questions you have. If any. Oh yes, Catherine reminds me that on gaia.com/Harish, you can find a full-length guided version of this practice as well. Yes, Martin mentions correctly that you can do this practice with the Hamsa Mantra, or so hum. The Tantrikas preferred Hamsa. The verse doesn't mention that, but it's part of the oral tradition that you can do this practice with Hamsa. Breathing in hum, breathing out sa. Ephrat asks, can the prana go up when you exhale lying down? It goes up when you exhale lying down and when you exhale sitting up, both. Right, again, the air is literally going from the lungs up and out. But in this practice, you're imagining it's going out through the crown of your head. And by the way, if you really progress with this practice, after a couple years, you will feel, maybe even a couple months, you will feel that the crown of your head is slightly warmer on the exhale and slightly cooler on the inhale, because you are actually moving prana through the Brahma Randra, the door of God in the crown of the head, the place where you had a soft spot as an infant. That's called the door of God, Brahma Randra. And if you succeed in moving the prana in and out of that point, you will eventually actually feel it. It's very subtle, but you'll feel slightly cooler there on the inhale. And that's a good sign that the practice is bearing its full fruit. For most people, it takes a while. So, Ashton says, in Taoist Qigong, the inhale is associated with energy traveling up the spine. Confusing because of that influence, perhaps, yes. And we also have tantric practices where it's the exhale associated with the energy going up the spine. But yes, Taoism has a huge influence on Western culture as well. And so that is a potential source of confusion, absolutely. Martin asks, how brief of a pause is recommended? 1 to 3 seconds. If it happens spontaneously that the pause is longer with no effort, then that's great. But 1 to 3 seconds is just perfect, because there shouldn't be any tension. And if most people, if they go longer than 3 seconds, there's a little bit of tension that starts to come in. But as Tara notes, sometimes the breath pauses spontaneously longer. And let it be as long as it wants. The breath will start again at just the right moment, and you can't hurt yourself with this practice, right? The breath will start again at the right moment to oxygenate the brain. The brain knows what it's doing, or the Kundalini Shakti knows what it's doing in relation to the brain. Okay, so Yes. So yeah, yes, Nihal, prana is exhale and apana is inhale. But rather than use the Sanskrit terms, let's just emphasize the importance of the fact that exhale is up and inhale is down. That is what matters here in this practice. And even if that's counterintuitive for you, to do the practice correctly, you must work with it that way. I've had people ask, can I just do it the other way? No, not in this practice. It has a very different effect. Yeah, so the breath, Manoj asks about some Sanskrit terms. The breath pause is kumbhaka, puraka, kumbhaka, rechaka, kumbhaka. But, it's just a very short kumbhaka. And you don't have to completely fill the lungs because this practice is supposed to be relatively easeful, not effortful or striving. Martin asks, another Martin, does good alignment or posture make a difference to this practice? Yes. Every practice that utilizes the central channel, you need to sit up straight. And other practices that don't utilize the central channel, you don't. But this is one. So yes, sitting up straight is important. Not rigid, but straight. Okay, good. So those are all the questions. And we're out of time, but we'll do the practice. And we'll continue with this pattern of trying to do the practice in each video. Each video from now on will be one verse, with very rare exceptions, sometimes two, if a practice has two verses. Okay, so let's simply get centered. It's very important to relax the jaw. Let the jaw be fully relaxed. Let the jaw hinge, fully relaxed. So relaxed that the lips almost come apart, or perhaps they do come apart. And then put the focal point of your awareness above your head, several inches above your head at the upper limit of your energy body. And then draw the inhale down from that point through the crown of the head, down into the base of the heart. Pause. Then let the exhale begin from the base of the heart region, flowing up, out the crown of the head, and to the upper limit of your energy body. Pause. Begin the inhale from that same point, the upper limit of the energy body, drawing the inhale down through the crown of the head, through the door of God, the door of the Absolute, down into the base of the heart. Pause. Let the exhale begin from the same point, flowing up through the central channel, up and out the crown of the head, to the upper limit of the energy body, the upper limit of your aura, if you will. Pause. Again. Again. Please complete that cycle. And you can continue doing the practice on your own after the video ends in a minute here. It's very simple, it's very powerful, it's very beautiful, and the experience of it deepens over time. So please do experiment with this practice. In fact, I invite you to continue this practice every day, at least until the next video. So that's your assignment for the week, to do this practice for maybe 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes every day, or twice a day for the next 7 days. Wonderful to be with all of you, as always. And we will continue with verse 25 next time. Om. Postscript. I don't want to forget to say thank you to the patrons on Patreon whose generous support makes it possible for me to do free courses. And I also want to mention, for anyone who wants to join Patreon, we are doing a webinar tomorrow at 11 Pacific time on the Tantra Sada of Abhinavagupta, and it's a very juicy portion of the Tantra Sada, the essence of Tantra by Abhinavagupta. So please join. It's only $25, and then you get access to hours and hours and hours of content in the past as well. You get access to everything immediately when you join, as well as the new material. So it's an incredibly good deal. You could join for $25, stay for a month, absorb 24 hours of content, and then cancel your membership if you want. But anyway, just want to mention that because we will have a Patreon webinar tomorrow. Take care, everyone. Be well. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend, week, month, year, life. Om.